Okay. So with like Ubuntu LTS then, are they like not shipping patches for that? I don't use Ubuntu LTS, so I'm not really sure on their release module. Do they like not have any like are they backporting the patches themselves or
Yes, that's what everybody
okay.
does.
Okay.
So
Huh.
like if you look at Rel's GNOME shell and if you look at Rel's GNOME and you look at or CentOS Stream, because if you look at the CentOS Stream Git repositories for the GNOME packages, and if you look at Ubuntu's in Launchpad, and if
Mhm.
you look at OpenSUSE's in the OBS, um, that is everybody's doing it on their own. There is actually no central LTS for GNOME. The
Huh.
GNOME project, I believe, historically has said that they don't want to be in the business of long-term maintained stuff,
Mhm.
and so they don't. And so the distributors that are shipping long-term maintained versions of GNOME are doing it on their own,
Mhm.
and everybody picks a different version. Actually, this is why SUSE does a rebase every other year. So like they're moving up to GNOME 45 with the upcoming Leap 15.6. In the past, Red Hat used to do rebases for
Mhm.
Rel's GNOME, but now that they release Rel every 3 years, it's a little less necessary.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, and then if you look at what Ubuntu does, is they don't do anything. They just for the most part, what happens is they will backport fixes when they discover it. But again, their GNOME is highly customized. They have their own non-upstream patches, and so for them, it's a very different situation from what GNOME and from what SUSE and Red Hat do.
Mhm.
So again, it's not a bad approach. It's not a good approach. Whatever way you want to, I mean, depending on your perspective, it's a good or a bad approach.
Mhm.
Um, the main advantage, I think, to the Ubuntu approach is that they get to actually define their experience more. Um, and I actually feel like sometimes it gives Ubuntu slightly more power within the GNOME ecosystem by being able to say, like, if we don't like this, we're actually willing to ship something to our users to support their needs.
Mhm.
Um, and this is actually kind of like and I'm not saying this like in a negative light or in an antagonistic light, right? Like for Fedora KDE in particular, when with Plasma 5, they were single click by default upstream,
Mhm.
and we switched to double click
I think
because that was
that's a
what
big part
user
of
that was what user
yeah, every distro was doing double click. So, yeah. Well,
well, we were the
maybe not.
last one to switch, and
Okay.
that was
Right.
that was that was the that was the that was the point where everybody started considering maybe we should do this upstream,
Mhm.
because at that point none of the big ones were doing it. All the ones that typically go like vanilla
Mhm.
were changing this default, and so at that point we're like, okay. And this is actually an important counterweight. Like, how I know you've talked about in your videos how, like, distributors should be getting out of the business of delivering software, but I think it's actually important
I
to recognize that this is the counterweight that we actually do provide. Like, by doing this, we are able to also say, hey, our users are saying that stuff around this is not right,
Mhm.
and we're able to push back and provide that feedback, because um when you funnel it, when you look at the feedback funnel,
Mhm.
when individual users are doing stuff and they give it, it's very unfocused, it's scattered, it's a lot of it.
Mhm.
It's also easy to miss as noise. But then when it gets funneled down into the distributors, and the distributors are collating it and they're understanding, and hopefully they're actually engaging with the user base that's actually they're shipping to. That turns into more um, focused,
Right.
actionable feedback that you can then take back to the upstream project and say, hey, this is what our users are telling us. This is what we're doing in response to them. What do you think? What should we do here? And when you don't have that part of the loop, right? Like, you start having malfeasance
Mhm.
in software development, because you don't have the power balance, you don't have a counterweight to
Mhm.
what somebody does. Like, so this is one of the reasons why I always have mixed feelings about Flatpaks and snaps, especially with how people talk about it as like the developer now fully controls it. You're getting it as they envision.
Right.
But like, when you look at how that works out in other ecosystems, in Windows and Mac, it turns into sometimes abusive relationships with the users.
Mhm.
The counterweight in open source is that, and I think a lot of people have forgotten that we're not supposed to consider upstreams 100% good. The
Mhm.
fact that open source upstream projects are 100 are most of the time good. I can't even say 100% because we now know that that's not true.
Definitely not 100%. No.
But generally speaking, upstreams are good, not because they don't have the power to do something bad, but they know that we have the power to call them out.
Mm-hmm.
If you take that counterweight away, it becomes a lot easier, to get down that downward spiral of user experiences.
Mm-hmm.
I also regularly talk to people about, they say, well, I hate Electron apps. I would rather have native apps. Yeah, okay, so what Electron apps do you use? Well, I use Skype, I use Discord, I use, I use Teams. You know what all those things have in common? You don't get to choose what your user experience is.
Mm-hmm.
You also don't get to choose whether you can use it or not. So my working theory has been for several years now is that if you are using an Electron, if a software developer is giving you an Electron app, it's either one of two things. Either one, they're just really new to the whole app thing, and they're just taking a web thing and then turning it into an app. You see a lot of small apps like this with Electron that way.
Mm-hmm.
But if it's a company provided app, or if it's something that's like a big time high production thing like Visual Studio Code, like Teams and Skype and Discord, they use Electron because they know they don't have to work at providing a better experience. They don't have to, because you are stuck.
Mm-hmm.
You can't say no. You can't walk away. And if you can't walk away, there is no incentive for anyone to do any better.
Mm-hmm.
So why should they bother to invest in performance, resource usage, technologies, integration? Why should they bother? They don't have a reason to, either between network effects or being forced to by other external factors. They know they've got you. And so this is why, like, I look at this. Telegram's a native app, but Signal isn't. Element isn't. And we also, Discord isn't. Skype isn't. Slack isn't. These are, with the notable exception of Element, every single one of these apps, I can't choose to use something else.
Mm-hmm.
If I can't choose something else, they don't have to choose to be better.
Right.
And so if you think of it that way, a lot of decisions around how apps are being made make a ton more sense.
Mm-hmm.
As long as that there's some kind of user or consumer or distributor side counterweight that they can say no. What do they have to do? They don't have to do anything. They don't have to listen to you. They don't have to care what you think.
No, I definitely see where you're coming from here.
It's just been my observations over the 10 years of like doing this stuff, and in corporate environments having to be part of that vendor engagement stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Like, yeah, we don't care what you think. You don't have a choice.
Yeah, a lot of the people I've talking to about this are the developers who want to, like, they want to have a. There's obviously reasons why a developer would want to have upstream packaging. Like, it makes it considerably easier to do debugging. You know that users are going to be running the application, assuming the solution is working properly, is going to be running in a consistent environment. That makes it considerably easier for them. So you don't have to worry about, oh, we have a Debian user here, they're reporting 5-year-old bugs. They're not going to, because they're running the latest version. From their perspective, that makes sense. And after the recent XZ incident, I am definitely... I'm of two minds about this, because I can absolutely see the value in doing it upstream, but I see where you're coming from with the downstream stuff as well, and I don't think the downstream stuff's ever going to go away. Like, there's always going to be a position... Well, the code's open source. If someone wants to distribute it, they can distribute it. But I don't know. It's a really tough problem. I don't think there is one side that is correct here. I do see where you're going with this, though.
I'm making here is that you should celebrate that the counterweight exists, because what that does is it's a check that makes sure that people recognize that there's a power balance here, and that they are motivated to not upset that balance in a negative way, because they will be called out on it. It's actually, I think, like, my biggest problem with a lot of this stuff, where, like, in principle, Flatpaks and snaps are probably fine, right? Like, we've talked about this before. They're fine, right? I personally have had subpar developer experiences working with Flatpaks. My understanding is that that is actually actively improving. So,
yeah, that seems to be
yay.
a common thing that's said. Like, the user experience is incredible. The developer experience is... It could be. Like, Canonical's done an incredible job at making the Snap experience and getting people involved in the Snap ecosystem. Like, they've put a lot of effort into that, but, you know, Flatpak being, like, a community-run thing, it's taken more time to get there.
Well, and it's also, like, the different aim. So, like, if you look at where snaps and Flatpaks originate from and where their motivations are, it's a little different. If you look at how Flatpak works, you got to build everything from source. You got to produce your own bundles. You got to do your own auditing and whatever. And there's not a lot of help for you from the Flatpak and FlatHub people in this respect. And then you have some of the, frankly, weird rules and guidelines that FlatHub gives you, which I'm just like, why do we care about GNOME HIG in FlatHub? This is, like, not a thing we should be, like, conform to what guidelines? Whose guidelines? What are we talking about here? Right? But but if you look at what they're talking about as if all the developers are affiliated with a particular ecosystem. But if you look at the Snap side of things, there's a basic assumption that the developer is an individual doing their own thing, but they also want to do reuse in a trusted way. So one of the core differences between Snaps and Flatpaks that I think Snap does somewhat better is that out of the gate, you can reuse Ubuntu packages or RPMs or whatever. You can reuse existing packages for constructing snaps. Outside of Fedora Flatpaks, that's not really a thing. You can't reuse existing packages to construct your application bundles. So you don't have a trusted input pipeline for building Flatpaks. You get to be that raccoon digging out free code and hoping that everything is going to be fine.
I love it so much.
Look, man, I love that blog post since I first saw it 2 years ago. And, like, when Exorcist happened, I'm like, here, this is important.
Also, I love that name for XZ as well.
Right. So Exorcist is Justin Flory, who the Fedora community architect, Justin Flory. He came up with that name, and I'm like, I'm running with this. This is fantastic. And now it's, like, everywhere, and I'm just like, yes. But, like, the Exorcist incident, right? I linked to that blog post about it, and then you talked about it on I don't know where you got it from, because a bunch of other people did,
I
too.
think I might have seen
like
your repost, but yeah, someone reposted it.
But, like, that post, that quote sticks with me forever. You are a raccoon digging out free code, because that is what a lot of them do. Like, if you look at some of the Flatpak builds manifests, it's just, okay, we're going to slap this thing, we're going to slap that thing in, we're going to run these things, and we're going to do these flags, and we're going to, boom, done.
Yeah, the Audacity Flatpak is a good example of this, where the Audacity Flatpak, from my understanding, is unusable. I don't think it supports the file portal.